Okay, so there's three main parts to setting up your potting machine for your determined pot size. Part number one is this component, which the in and out movement here, which is determined by the diameter of your pot, and that is controlled over here on this dial. Part number two is the denester component, and then last area is these arms. Okay, so let's talk about component number one, which is, as we mentioned earlier, determined by the diameter of your pot. At the moment you can see this is too tight, so we need to open this guide up a little bit on this dial, simply by winding this till the stack slides down and rests on the first plate here, which is what we'll set it up on initially. Okay, so now that we've determined the stack is resting on that plate, we want to just ensure that the stack's not so tight that it can't slide down, such as like that, but it needs to be able to drop with a certain amount of force that the stack's not going to go beyond that plate, but also with amount of freedom there that the stack will also drop down nicely without any tension there. So by grabbing the bottom of the whole stack and just jiggling it in the guide, we can determine that stack's in there nicely on that top plate rather. Now that we're happy with how the stack sits on this top plate, we're going to see how it sits on the bottom plate when it does its movement. So with a quick start-stop, holding the stack up out of the way, we can see this bottom plate jumps out, and at this point we've determined that it's too far out. So by releasing this bottom lever, we can move this little arm into position where it's grabbing the underside of that top lip like it was on this plate. And at that position, again, the tension's right without being too loose. And I'll lock that off. So now we've determined that these two plates are in the correct position, let me explain how they work. So as the bottom plate at this point in time is holding the bottom pot, when we press start, it'll jump out of the way backwards, and this top plate will go into the gap between the two bottom pots. So they will work in a backwards and forwards. Okay, so the third part of the pot setup is adjusting these arms, which is obviously determined again by the diameter of your pot. So just release the arms on these two levers and move the arms out into position so they are just either side of your pot, but allowing some small amount of movement in there. And then when you're happy with how that's centered on that plate and the arms around either side of the pot, just lock them off. So important thing to note about these arms is we always suggest having them right at the top of the pot. So set the arms at the top of the pot, and that adjustment is made by sliding all this arm component up and down on this shaft, and then when you're happy with where it's at the top of the pot, lock it off on this bolt here. Okay, so another important thing to note is these arms need to allow for some slack around the pot. So when the pots drop out of the denester, there's some there's some room for error in there. And then again, these little aluminium guides can move up to the back of the pot, but again, allowing for some slack in there, just so there's a small room for error when the pot denests. So last but not least, we're going to talk about the drill setup. As we mentioned earlier, the pot arms are at the top of the pot, supporting the pot at the top. And one of the reasons for this is when the drill comes around, it presses down on the pot, and with the arms being at the top, it carries some support around the pot and stops the drill crushing the pot. And we can make adjustments for left and right of the drill in the center of the pot on this dial. So by turning this, allows the drill to go either right or left, depending on where you want it centered in the pot. So the height adjustment of the drill is done by means of a dial on the outside of the machine, and just turn that to raise the drill up or down, depending on the depth you want on the drill mechanism. This little sweeper blade here is designed, obviously, as the pot is getting filled with potty mix, there's going to be a certain amount of it mounds up on the top of the pot, and this sweeper is designed to set it at a height to remove a bit of excess potty mix as it comes around, and that will just level it off before it comes through to the drill component. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to one of Primehort's technical support team.